Hey everybody! In this video we're going to talk about drawing noses from different angles. So in my previous videos about noses, I've primarily just drawn them from the front and from the side. And what we're going to focus on in this video is foreshortened noses. So foreshortening is a term that we use anytime that your object that you're drawing, in this case a nose, is kind of at an angle that projects towards you, where, if we look at my fingers here, we can't really see the entire length of my finger like that. It's kind of squished into this space. And so when we look at a nose, maybe from a tilted view or a 3/4 view, it starts to become a little foreshortened, or if maybe we're looking downward at it, it might become more elongated. So I'm going to draw kind of tilting down, tilting up, and from 3/4 view, and then tilted upwards at a 3/4 view. So lots of different angles. So the main thing when we get started drawing a nose, just like we do when we draw it from the front or the side, is think about the shapes that it creates. So if we're looking at a nose that is kind of pointing downward, it's almost like we're creating an arrow, right? So that's the most simple breakdown of the nose. Fun fact, that's how I used to draw noses when I was a kid, because that's what made sense to me. So if we start like this, that's totally fine. And then from here, we can start to kind of break down the shapes of the nostrils and the ball of the nose. So like you've probably seen if you watch any of my other videos about noses, all of these shapes vary drastically depending on the type of nose that you have. So the nose that I'm drawing in this case is kind of a longer, straight nose with slightly larger nostrils. So basically, when I am focusing on this, I'm just going to think about the shape of the bridge of the nose. So in this case, it's pretty thin, and I'd say the ball of the nose is not much wider than the bridge of the nose. So in this case, it's almost like just a rectangle coming down. And then if I want to look at the nostrils, they're kind of tilted upwards instead of coming outwards. And that's going to give us more of that shape of the nose being tilted down, like a face is looking downwards. So from here, I can start to define the form just a little bit more. So from this angle, you're not really getting a ton of information of the nose. Like we aren't seeing the insides of the nostrils or anything. It's just the outer shapes. So it's pretty simplified. There's not a lot going on here. It's mostly just focusing on the shape of the nostrils and the shape of the bridge of the nose. So really simply, we have this, and then I can start shading. So depending on where the light is coming from, will tell you where the shadow is going. So in my case, the light is coming from this way. So I'm going to have more of a shadow on this side. And there's not too much of a differentiation between the ball of the nose and the bridge of the nose on the model that I am using. So I'm not going to see too much of a curve here. It's going to be kind of straight down. And the curve of the nostrils kind of fall into that place. We have a bit of shading kind of coming off the bridge of the nose where it transitions into the cheek area. And it's going to be a little bit darker between the nostril and the ball of the nose because there's kind of an indentation there. And then around the outer edges of the nostrils, we're going to have a little bit deeper shading because of the shape of them. They have more kind of folds over there, so we're going to see a little deeper shadow. So this person is smiling in the picture. I think that also lends itself to why the nostrils are kind of angled upright so much further, because it kind of defines the line of the cheek around the mouth, those smile lines. We're going to have a slightly lighter shadow on this side. And then I think I'll just hit this with a blending stump to kind of smooth it out a little bit. So one thing to note when we're shading is to think about like the direction that the form is going. So we don't always want to be just like straight up and down. Sometimes we want to kind of curve around the form to kind of create a sense of roundness to it. Like going across it like this is something we call cross hatching, or cross contour lines. So I'm kind of going around the shape of the form, which kind of helps me create volume as I am creating my shading. All right, so there's a simple sketch of a nose that is tilted downwards, like you're looking down. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, in the second nose, I'm going to draw it slightly tilted upwards. So, like if you lift your chin just a little bit and the nose is tilted upwards. So, where normally we would see just a hint of the nostrils showing, in this case, we're going to see just a little bit more of them. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with just kind of the basic shape that is created by the ball of the nose and the nostrils, and which is usually kind of a triangle, rounded triangle. And from there, I am going to kind of create another triangle to make the bridge of the nose. All right, so the difference in this shape as compared to a nose that is just regularly looking forwards is the bridge of the nose is going to be quite a bit shorter. So that's where we're getting into that foreshortening like I was talking about. So if I measure, in this case, the top of the ball of the nose to the bottom of the septum, we're going to see is about the height of the bridge of the nose. So just the bridge of the nose is shorter. So from here, I'm going to start to break down my shapes just a little bit more. So again, like every nose is different. So the shape of the ball of the nose and the shape of the nostrils, the size of them is always going to be different depending on, who you're drawing. So some of us might have a really thin nose, some of us might have really wide nostrils. So this is always going to be different. And that's just something, the more you draw, the more you kind of observe closely the different shapes that you see on different people, the more it's going to make sense to you. So really just, I don't know, go people watching. Maybe not during a pandemic, just Google people on the internet or something. But, the internet's a great place where you can find all these awesome resources. So the nostrils, we're going to see just a little bit more of them. And remember, it's not just like a circle. It's not, like a perfect just hole that's black, right? There's kind of parts that go in, parts that go out. So what we're seeing here is we're seeing part of the nostrils kind of coming up in the shadow here. So there's sort of different shapes as we are drawing them. And then the sides of the nostrils kind of wrap around here. I made them a little too wide, so I'm just going to squish that in a little bit. All right, so we have the basic nose sketched out here, so then it's just shading. So in this case, I'm going to have more of a shadow on this side than on this side. So we'll just kind of block that in a little bit. So the nose I'm drawing is kind of angular. The ball of the nose is kind of more like a pentagon, like an upside down pentagon. So it's got some more of these sort of flat panes towards the front, which is interesting. I think that's kind of why I chose this nose to draw. And the septum is just a little crooked. Always my favorite. I love a crooked nose. All right, so now we have a nose that's just slightly turned up. So like maybe if you just tilt your chin up just a tish. All right, so our next nose is going to be one that's totally tilted up, so looking straight up there. All right, so when we look at a nose that is, and we're looking straight at the underside of it, so your head is tilted completely back, we aren't really going to see much of the bridge of the nose at all. We're mostly going to be seeing just the nostrils. So again, this all depends on the shape of your nose. This triangle would be the ball of the nose and the nostrils. In this case, this nose is kind of thin, but we could widen the triangle or make it flatter or taller depending on the shape of the ball of the nose. So in this case, the ball of the nose is kind of sitting here and the nostrils form the ends of the triangle like this with the septum kind of in between. And then the bridge of the nose, basically we're seeing kind of the curve where the brow is around the eye right next to the ball of the nose. So we're not really seeing much of the bridge of the nose at all. We're seeing the forehead starting right away. So in this case, the focus really is on the nostrils themselves, so the opening of the nostrils. So we're just kind of looking at how, or the shape of the nostrils around here and how they kind of create the septum. So yeah, we're getting the straight up pig nose here, looking at it from this angle. And the nostrils are kind of like bean shaped. They're not round. They're very organic in the way they kind of curve around and create sort of new forms where they meet different structures on the face. So we kind of see the septum has a little bit of shadow here where it meets the philtrum. That's that little dip above your lips. And then the sides of the philtrum kind of curve into the nostrils. So those are sort of the different structures that we're looking at from this angle. And again, once we kind of get the basic structures put in place, then we can start shading. So we're going to see kind of this indication of the bridge of the nose right here where it slopes into the cheek. There's just going to be a little gap in the shading where we'll see just a slight bit of a highlight there. Not too much though. It's going to be just a hint. And as we get to the bottom of the nostrils, we'll see some kind of shading where it moves out onto the philtral area. All right, so here we have a nose that is completely tilted upward. And like I said earlier, this space right here, the shape of the ball of the nose compared to the nostrils, can vary drastically. So we can have this tall triangle, it could be shorter and wider, or it could just, bend itself outwards more, just depending on the shape of your nose and the angle at which you are tilted. All right, so the three noses that we just did were all forward facing, but just tilted upwards. So what we're going to do now is kind of work on noses that are more at an angle, say for example like 3/4 view, but also with a tilt. So that's going to kind of play with the foreshortening just a little bit as well. So when we work on noses that are kind of a 3/4 view, it's still starting with that like basic triangle shape. So say for example like this, and then I'm just going to block in the shape of the ball of the nose from here, and then add in the nostrils. And then usually from a 3/4 view, you're going to see just a hint of the other nostril off to the side. This angle that I'm drawing right now is basically just a standard 3/4 view, maybe just slightly tilted upward, but not very much. All right, so once I have this kind of blocked in, I can start to define the form just a little bit more. Okay, so we can see the nose is just kind of at a side. We'll see a little bit of the nostril coming down. Usually the philtrum kind of comes out a little bit in front of this nostril, but mostly that's just shading. So we can just start shading away. All right, so we have here just a nose at a standard 3/4 angle. So the next are going to be a bit more foreshortened, so more of a tip. All right, so this next one is kind of a 3/4 view from with the head tilted up. So what I am going to do is kind of start with that triangle of the nose. It's going to be a little bit angled this time, a little bit longer on one side than the other because of the angle it's sitting at. And then the bridge of the nose is kind of shallow on this person, so it doesn't come out very far from the face. And that's going to kind of change sort of the shape that we're looking at. So now I'm adding in the nostrils, and I'm just kind of seeing sort of the direction that they're laying. Because here we have kind of the philtrum overlapping this nostril just a little bit from the angle that it's sitting. So it kind of is going to come down just a little bit here, and then the lips will be hitting just a little bit higher here. When we get to these foreshortened angles, they start to get a little more challenging because our brain wants us to make things look a certain way, even if that's not really what is happening. So it just gets a little harder, and you gotta really focus on what you're actually seeing so that you don't end up making a mistake in there. So let's see, this person has kind of wider nostrils, and that is going to kind of help create the shape of the nose as I'm drawing it. And as usual, the nostrils kind of wrap around the opening. I'm just kind of refining the shape as I go. And I notice the ball of the nose, the largest protrusion is right up here, so not as up high as I had started with. So I'm just kind of adjusting that as it attaches onto the bridge of the nose. The bridge of the nose is not very long in this instance, and that is primarily due to the angle that the head is tilted at. But I think this person's nose is also a little on the shorter side too, so it's a little wider and shorter. And in that case, usually what happens is you don't really have as much of a bridge of the nose. So like we did in the last one, there's more of a noticeable bump in the bridge of the nose, whereas this one is a little flatter, so it doesn't quite stick out as far. Okay, so from here, we'll just add our shading. All right, so there is our last nose drawn at a 3/4 angle while also tipped up. So here we have 5 different noses from different angles using foreshortening. So that's kind of when we squish what we're seeing because it's projecting towards us pretty dramatically. And what I would suggest, my biggest advice for you if you're learning how to draw facial features from different angles is look in the mirror, go on the internet, just find pictures of people or use your friends or your siblings or your family, just someone, and draw features from different angles and different expressions and just fill up a whole page with, like 20 different noses. And doing that is really going to force you to practice and see these features at different angles. And that is what's really going to help you grow in your portraiture drawing. That's what I have for you today. Thanks for watching and keep creating.